I think the risk for banks in terms of adopting APIs are the same risks that banks have faced for all new generations of technology. The business of taking deposits and making loans is probably 2,000 years old. With each new wave of technology, these banks are the last to convert to the new way of doing things. Banks are already trying to make their software architecture more modular. They have big monolithic channels to customers that carry multiple services, but customers have to buy the whole package. They have some old systems with fantastic data and fantastic processes that aren't fully presentable to the API economy. PSD2 gives a focus to their projects. It gives a purpose to their investments in software architecture. And I think there's a strong opportunity for them to open themselves up. The key for banks seeing this as an opportunity to modernize is not API provision, because they see PSD2 as a compulsory provision of APIs forced by the regulator. It's actually API consumption. And I think once people in banks get their heads around that and realize that yes, they have to put extra data out into the market to help the ecosystem grow, but on the other side, they can take data into their organization to improve their decision making. I think that's actually the thing that changes people's mindsets into having an API strategy rather than having a PSD2 compliance obligation. Developers will have some shared interests with banks in that they'll want the bank to be successful, they'll want the bank accounts to be useful and reliable as part of their process. They will also have divergent commercial interests. In certain cases, they'll be a competitor as well as a complementary service. I think developers bring an operational challenge to banks in that they are far more knowledgeable in broad terms than banks' own customers. They'll be quick to spot flaws in the data set. The reality of PSD2 is that they are championed by the regulators, and if they're unhappy with the purposeful nature of community management by banks, they'll make noise about it. I think banks need to make some permanent appointments, and there's some concern about that in that they're not quite sure if this person or team should have profit and loss responsibility around APIs, but just appointing people into project roles around PSD2 is not acknowledging the inevitability of this. The second thing I recommend is educate the unconverted. There's people with monetization responsibilities in banks for certain market segments or certain product sets that don't have a technical background, who don't understand APIs. They have alternative ways of reaching the market, tried and tested methods. And the third thing and the strongest strategic recommendation is API consumption. In the competitive world, banks will take some punches from emerging competitors or their current competitors availing of data that they provide through APIs. You've got to throw some punches back. The way to do that in the API economy is to consume APIs.